Welcome, everybody. I'm your moderator today, Randy Road. Thank you for joining us. I'm looking forward to a active and engaging conversation on this really interesting challenge. Let me jump into the slides on XR Content Repositories, a grand immersive learning challenge. So what is this grand immersive learning challenge idea, and where does it come from? The Immersive Learning Research Network, or iLRN, as we like to call, has a new initiative called the Circle of Scholars. It was announced at the June conference. The Circle of Scholars has had its first round of meetings and identified some of the challenges that the scholars are seeing in the field of immersive learning. There are links here. This slide deck will be shared after the talk today. So if you miss a chance to use some of these links, this will be made available to you later as well. But this will take you to information about the Circle of Scholars. One of the first challenges that was exposed was around the idea of extended reality repositories. The sort of collective agreement was everybody is struggling with how to store immersive learning content, how to make things like 3D objects sort of broadly available. There are commercial services for various reasons we will get into. Those often don't work or fully meet the needs of education. A lot of people talked about how do we archive things, projects get stuck in file folders, structures that, get lost when somebody who knows where things are disappears, that sort of stuff. So that's what we're going to work on today. The second of the challenges, which was also kind of a broad theme that came up, was thinking about immersive learning research standards. And that is the second of the webinars, which will take place in December. This is all evolving quickly. So a date has not been set yet, but we know it will be in December. Chris Dede, Senior Research Fellow from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, will be the moderator for that conversation. Please stay tuned to the iLRN events page. That should be posted within the next week, a date for that. And look forward to having you all join us for that as well. Also, this is a conversation which will continue, and these conversations will lead up to the iLRN annual conference in 2025. This year will be in Chicago, June 15th through 19th. There's still an open call for presenters to submit a proposal. Please consider submitting a proposal or attending the conference itself. And one of the focuses is this grand challenges. In fact, there is a content area focused on that you will see when you're proposing a paper. So please follow those links. Look at the proposal. You have until early January to get your proposal in. And we look forward to seeing a robust series of presentations to give all of you a chance to share the work that you're doing at your institutions. All right, so moving on to our grand challenge, XR Content Repositories, Peer Perspectives, Approaches, and Next Steps. Panelists today, Sean Hauze from San Diego State University, Ekaterina Prasolova-Førland from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, and Fridolin Wild from the Enhanced Learning at Institute of Educational Technology at the Open University. And I know Fridolin, I sort of butchered that, I'm sorry, but you'll set us straight when you talk. And Randy Road, I am working on a number of initiatives with iLRN and VR XR strategist in education. So our goals for the conversation today, you're not going to get any answers. So at the moment, this is a grand challenge because we haven't totally figured it out. Although our panelists will share what they are working on, and they are trailblazers in their own ways. They are starting to address this challenge, and there's a lot to be learned from hearing from them and where they've gone. Whoops. Sorry. There we go. So learn what others are doing. Also thinking about how one of the ideas of the grand challenges is to look for ways that we as a community that is interested in this, how can we together work on these challenges, contribute collectively, and how can iLRN kind of sit in the middle and help, pull this all together for our communities. So Michael would like to launch the first poll. So let's see here. Library of 3D objects, pretty popular. Share assets internally as an internal library. Certainly a strong theme. Archiving projects. So really, it's kind of, the main part there. All right. So the first area of focus, so for each of the panelists, so with your own work, what are the problems that you're working to solve with your projects? Who are your core users? And, given what we just saw, how does that resonate with you as the kinds of XR content that you are working with? And Ekaterina, I'll give you the mic first.
Thank you, Randall. So just to quickly introduce myself, I'm professor at the Department for Education, Lifelong Learning, Norwegian University of Science and Tech, and I'm also founder and head of IMTEL research group in LOVE, standing for Innovative Immersive Technologies for Learning. And we are working on creating, developing XR apps for education for widely different target user groups, everything from young job seekers to aquaculture industry in the Norwegian Armed Forces to neurosurgeons. And we teach education XR. We also, here as you see at the web page of our lab. And also I am Norway's ambassador for Women Immersive Tech. And though we work for a wide different user groups, we are especially passionate about including underrepresented group into the design and of XR applications and research on XR, on educational XR. And for example, we worked a lot with young job seekers, unemployed youth, and also I'm very passionate about including women. That's why we became a part of the consortium for the European project XR for Human. Next slide, please. And it's a 3 years horizon European funded project where the main objective is to create a roadmap for Europe and afterwards, hopefully for the rest of the world, on how to create and use and regulate safe, ethical and inclusive XR. And this roadmap will serve both for developers, for politicians, for citizens, end users, or all kind of stakeholders. And we are part of the project. We have created this XR for Human experience library. You see the link at the page. And by that, we invite primarily European XR community to share their XR experiences, their projects, and to highlight their commitment to best practices. So these applications are supposed to show how XR experiences can adhere to the code of conduct that we're about to develop, and also how they can kind of serve as example of how XR applications could be accessible, inclusive, focus on data privacy, suitable for users with different kind of disabilities, such as vision or hearing disabilities, and and be helpful and include users with different backgrounds. And so the repository is not very big at the moment, but we are kind of inviting submissions, and also we are tagging these submissions based on aspects such as technology type, hardware, domain, user interface, accessibility, so that users can just have a search in this library and see examples of applications that adhere to this particular aspects. And also we are developing writing systems of guidelines and recommendations that will be connected to this library again, so that users of the repository can get advice on how to develop repositories that are ethical and inclusive and GDPR compliant. And our role as a partner also to make some additional developments to some of our existing applications to make them even more accessible and inclusive. Kind of serve as an example for others.
Fantastic. So, Ekaterina, in your work, what do you see as what was missing that made you sort of lean in with this initiative? What's the problem that you're trying to solve here?
Well, as far as I know, there is no such repositories, existing XR repositories that focus on the ethical aspects that demonstrate how XR should be developed and used in an ethical, safe, and inclusive manner. That's what we try to obtain. And in the longer run, this repository will be it will contain different projects that are developed that are funded by the European Commission, XR projects, and again, they're focusing on the ethical aspect. So if you wonder how shall I develop my XR project ethically, then you should kind of, when the project is finished, go to our repository and have a look for examples and have a look at guidelines and hopefully be inspired.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, that's terrific. And yeah, I mean, certainly important and terrific to see you taking the lead on that. Any other thoughts before we turn it over to Fridolin? You'll have more time to talk later.
Well, and also I just use the opportunity to invite submissions to our repository. We are creating that, and we are developing all the time the tagging and the we're working with the rating system that will be AI powered, so that you could kind of get some instant feedbacks on the guidelines, and they will be again based on the deliverables we are producing in this project. So we hope that our repository will be growing, of course. Kind of concerning your next question, we can't compete directly with such with Steam or with Meta store, but again, none of those are focusing on the ethical aspects. That's what is kind of the uniqueness of our repository.
Right, and you're in the first year of a 3-year project, is that right?
Yes, so it's basically 1 year, 1 year left of the 3-year project.
Gotcha. Okay, terrific. Fridolin.
So for me, I think the overall motivation hasn't changed. I'm an old iLearner, so for me, the big problem overall is how can we bridge the gap between theory and practice? How can we allow learning on the job? How can we make knowledge work more productive by putting information and theory and all the things we need to know directly into the situations where we require them, where we apply this knowledge in practice? And in my lab, we try to do that with a good mix of things, as you see here. So we have this kind of innovation staircase going from blue sky crazy ideas, most of which are just nonsense and not really relevant or anything but fun to think. And the few that we then select, we take forward to prototyping in a lab setting. So hardware and software, all focused on how we enhance human performance in learning situations. What survives that process and turns out to be actually implementable with today's technology, that then gets validated in innovation pilots. And quite recently, we also created at my institute a wider initiative that I'm chairing, which is an incubator accelerator that helps us talk to commercial partners and ignite EdTech that is ready for the market and help scale things. So that's how we work. So that passion for immersive learning and everything on the XR spectrum that has to do with learning is unchanged. If you jump to the next slide, I thought it's worth sharing, however, that of course, when we try to make that happen, we often run into complicated system landscapes as the one that you see here. And the quest for creating XR repositories certainly has to do with that need, that inherently any learning landscape, at least on an enterprise level, is something very distributed with very many components, with very different systems. And if we can't establish interoperability, then we're seriously doomed. And that's, I think, for me, the main motivation here in that context, to establish interoperability, which I happily share my definition in the chat for. Interoperability is that characteristic that emerges when we have several systems cooperatively exchange data in support of a human successfully accomplishing a system-spanning task. That's what we would try to do. And this here is a real-life example from a system that we use in space and astronaut training. So you would see on the left an app that then talks to LXR, a repository API that has an AI gateway to talk to third-party AI services such as ChatGPT and other open AI services, or IBM Watson, or fill in the name of the provider of your choice. While at the same time it needs to talk to a university-grade authentication system such as Keycloak, and maybe to some additional components. And I think on the next slide, I put out a few more things. Yeah, so we're engaged in a range of these. We're at the moment building also a web interface for that API with the aim that we can support others in a similar situation and establish that interoperability that is so much required. So it's maybe a technical take to your question, and the more general grand challenge take is, because if we don't, we simply will not become mainstream, because it is the system landscape that is required to create content at scale, reuse where it's possible, share, create open educational resources that are available to support others with getting started, and so on. And yeah, that slide, maybe we'll pick that up later. That's just an example how we then work with repositories.
Well, what I hear you saying, and I think that I love that idea of this, how do we mature, right? How do we move along, and kind of working through how to make systems, existing systems, integrate, as opposed to, I think, what people often find themselves, which is every single project is a one-off that's unique in its own way. And so is that sort of the idea of where you're going here, is this idea of trying to, set some standards to allow that process of maturing?
Yes. So it's also these best-in-class components that you typically have to work with if you do an XR production. It just comes naturally that there are different systems involved, and if you don't pay attention to it, you lose your assets. You will never find them again. For example, we just purchased or are about to get it installed, a volumetric video capturing system. It costs about $500,000. Does it matter now whether it's pounds or dollars or euros? No.
Still a lot of money.
It's very expensive. And if you consider that price and then do a calculation with the amount of work days we have in the year, which is in the UK about 200 or so after holidays, there is an amount of production we will have to do per day to bring down the price of any individual volumetric video recording. And that means, quite naturally, whatever we produce, we have to share, we have to curate, we have to look after, so that we do not have that cost again if we already have an asset that we can use.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Sean.
All right. Good morning from the West Coast here in California. I'm Sean Hauze. I serve as the Senior Director of Instructional Technology here at San Diego State. I also co-serve as co-chair with Randy of the EDUCAUSE XR community group. So encourage you all to join. Maybe Randy and I can share a link to that page for anyone who's interested in joining that group. But at San Diego State University, back in about 2016, we launched what we call the Virtual Immersive Teaching and Learning, or VITAL Research Center. I just put a link into the chat there. And since then, the use of XR across San Diego State and across the California State University has really grown at our campus in San Diego. We have, at this point, over 80 faculty members in at this point, nearly 100 courses using XR in some capacity. Some more kind of core to the curriculum and core to the kind of accreditation of their curriculum than others. Others are kind of just kind of testing the waters and et cetera. And we also have several student organizations that are developing content either for class projects, in partnership with faculty, et cetera. So that's all gone quite well in terms of hardware costs coming down, untethered standalone devices, making things easier to purchase several class sets of hardware, 360 video being very accessible, et cetera. But we found that the content has remained an obstacle in terms of high quality, customizable, open content. So it's great to see Ekaterina and Fridolin pursuing similar objectives here as we are at San Diego State and across the EDUCAUSE ecosystem. The initiative at San Diego State really rose out of a pretty unique need, which I'll briefly speak to. We had a faculty member in about 2018 who she had been teaching anatomy and physiology for several decades. And over that time of working with formaldehyde and, specimens, anatomical specimens that are saturated in formaldehyde, she developed a severe sensitivity, allergy, health condition where even entering the building where the cadavers and other specimens were kept, she would start to have kind of an anaphylactic reaction to that. So her chair, the chair of our biology department, came to our instructional technology services department and said, hey, we need an alternative. We've looked at commercial options for kind of digital anatomical libraries, and they're either too expensive and or not customizable, not photorealistic, et cetera. So at that point, and this again is 2018, several years ago, we discovered that photogrammetry may be a good option. We started developing a photogrammetry library for her to use. It went quite well, both 2D, 2D screens like computers and phones and tablets, but also using VR headsets. So that was going well. It turns out it was also very relevant for students who were pregnant and other students who could not use formaldehyde for one reason or another. And then in 2020, with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, this library became relevant not only here at San Diego State, but across the California State University system, representing nearly 500,000 students. So at that point, we said, hey, we should make this available to everyone globally, et cetera. And that kind of planted the seed for this library that you're seeing on the screen now, the Open Educational Extended Reality library that we have partnered with. Let me grab from in the chat here. And I see David Anderson on the webinar. Shout out to David, with this group called Recite, the Resource for Collaborative Immersive Technologies. So this is a National Science Foundation here in the United States has funded this effort. They're doing something similar already. So in collaboration with that EDUCAUSE community group and a coalition of 10 universities nationally here in the United States, we launched a big survey. We developed the previous kind of framework that you saw. And if you go to this link, which I'll also put into the chat here in a moment, you can sign up to have early access to this library. So happy to chat more about this throughout the hour here, but that's a summary of what we've done.
Right. And so, Sean, so I mean, you sort of talked generally about the the problem, one specific use case. How has that expanded though? I mean, that was kind of that was a 2018 problem you were solving then. This recent effort to do something a little more formal, what is kind of the goal now? What has changed, or where is your thinking, evolved to, around this current effort?
Thanks, Randy. So in talking about that 2018 issue, we identified that many other colleagues at those 10 institutions, which are listed on this website, including specifically North Carolina State University, they said, yeah, we have the same problem. We're developing content, but we feel, A, we want to share it, and B, we don't want to replicate what others have already done. So wanted to make a OER open library such that other people could download, adapt, etc., iterate on what we have already done. So in performing this a large scale survey through the EDUCAUSE XR community group, we had about 170 respondents from 5 continents, 100 different institutions respond and indicate what type of functionality. And happy to talk more, but it was on the previous screen in terms of collaboration, replication of research, things like lesson plans, et cetera. So not just 3D models and XR apps, but also kind of the pedagogical structures that go along with those experiences. And again, really a place to not only upload and share and download, but also iterate upon. So that's the goal. We plan to launch. We're currently collaborating with the Recite group. David Anderson again is on the call to make this a reality. But we have hundreds of models and 3D experiences and apps that are ready to go from those 10 institutions, and we hope everyone here will also contribute to that.
Fantastic, thank you. And in the slide deck we'll share afterwards, there's also a link to an article that this research group that Sean was involved with published. So for those who want to learn more about the process, there's a fantastic article there.
And I failed to mention where it says access the OEXR data dashboard on the previous slide. You can actually dig into the results of the data as well. Thanks, Randy.
Cool. Fantastic. All right. So our second poll. So pretty evenly distributed. For those of you, for the one person who chose other, feel free to stick in the chat kind of what other content you think is involved there. But it looks like we're pretty evenly distributed across these different types. All right, so let's move on. So again, kind of thinking sort of broadly, where in each case, what models were you looking to? I mean, they're either in the XR space or in other domains. Where are the examples that have informed what you're doing? And while you've chosen your model, are there other models you think are pretty good ones that you just didn't choose for whatever reason? And maybe Ekaterina, we'll start with you again.
Thank you. Well, we have been looking at existing repositories such as Steam, that is used by everyone, and but in our case, we had to ask ourselves, and this is the feedback we also got from European Commission. So what are we doing that is not done by the existing repositories? And again, this is we want to focus on the ethical and safety aspect that is not with the focus of commercial repositories, and this is, I believe, still unique. In the field. So we want to provide this repository, want to make a smart way of tagging it and organizing it so that everyone who wants to develop an XR experience that is adhering to the standards and it is ethical and inclusive and safe will go to our repository, and by interacting with this repository, by looking at different examples, we'll find an example, for example, what to do to make your experience more accessible. And it's not like that you have kind of to do everything from scratch. Sometimes it's just small additional stuff that is required to make your experience more accessible to those with dyslexia or visually impaired, for example, making the text bigger, introducing text to speech and things like that. So it wouldn't cost
Right.
too much.
So as you think about that, I know, for instance, some of the vendors, Meta, for instance, does have, some standards around accessibility. Do you find that those are helpful in informing this work, coming from the vendors? Are there things that they're just missing that you find, we educators need to be, more involved with?
Well, the field is very fragmented, and all the standards are using by some actors are not always compatible with standards used by others. That's why kind of a part of our project has been to kind of study the literature, study existing use cases, and kind of provide this unified code of conduct that XR experience, at least in Europe, should follow. And also there are some strict, maybe sometimes there are stricter requirements in Europe for privacy and storing data, such as the GDPR directive. And so this is something that all European stakeholders need to follow. So we collect inspirations and from all the actors. We going to kind of make something a cohesive, coherent code of conduct that provide kind of a standard or a benchmark for everyone.
Yeah. So Sean, I know in your work, the open educational resources, things like Merlot, were examples you looked at. How does that, so where was your thinking along those? Maybe even, I mean, with your familiarity with those, accessibility standards, is that part of what came into your thinking as well?
Yeah, all of the above. So some of the questions that we asked in that survey I mentioned were, one question was around what previous OER resources, open educational resources, libraries have you used? So people, of course, said Merlot, which was established here in the California State University system, OER Commons. They also mentioned things that weren't as kind of top of mind when I think OER resources, things like the Canvas Commons, right? The Canvas Learning Management System, Commons where people can upload course content, etc. So I think, in that regard, that we're seeing OER with XR as kind of through a wide lens, as David mentioned in the chat, how to use commercially available apps as well. We already talked about Steam and Meta, but certainly the development of lesson plans and other resources like research protocol, etc., we consider part of that OER ecosystem. So certainly taking cues from established open educational resource communities. And then in terms of the content requirements and the kind of technical needs that are unique to XR, we determined that it would be better to kind of establish a new type of library, again, in partnership with the National Science Foundation Recite project, rather than simply kind of embed it into an existing library. But again, certainly learning from the 5 R's of OER, which I can't necessarily list off the top of my head, but things like, being able to adapt the content and replicate and reuse. So yeah, I think in general, that's the thought. But just one thing I want to mention, and this came to mind on another emerging technology topic, which is AI, but I think it's also relevant to XR in that things are still certainly emerging, and there's not necessarily one library. Certainly, we all are contributing to different libraries that are complementary here, but also lots of commercial repositories as well. And I think when faculty or other colleagues come to us and say, yeah, but which headset should I use? Which, library should I grab content from? It's a bit like in the early internet days saying, which web browser should I use? It really doesn't matter. It's, whether you're using Netscape, 15, 20 years ago, or Chrome or Firefox today, the content within the web, I think, is what was relevant then. And now it's really the modality of extended reality. So I think these are all complementary to one another.
Right. Fridolin, so in your project, what models were you looking at? And I think, one of the things, that from the technical side, this interoperability sort of idea really sort of sticks out to me as, as you've been talking about what you've been doing.
I think I've always been looking to what we did with OpenLearn. OpenLearn is our OER platform, which is very, very successful. We started that back in 2006, and it had now 110 million visitors over that period. So that's a decent amount. There are like 900 courses available for free that people can export, import into their own, learn from. We have an institutional policy that we release a percentage of all courses. So a share of every course that is produced for money by us is released into OpenLearn. That works really well and attracts a lot of people. And I think that's the orientation example. We need this type of initiative for XR. I think only when we have hundreds of courses available, tens of thousands of materials, millions of visitors, then we can speak of it being available as mainstream. And for that, as I said earlier, data formats, exchange formats and standards are the most important point. So I've chaired one initiative in the IEEE. I've chaired P1589-2020, a standard that we worked on for 5 years, from 2015 to 2020. I'll put a link in the chat, which is a good proposal for how you can conceptualize augmented reality learning experience, put them into a modeling language, into a data format that becomes executable and exchangeable across platforms. So you can use our Moodle plugin to store that, host it for your students, and use our XR app to download and execute it. And as the web expands, I'm sure we will also see a proliferation of tools available, and standards become ever more so important. I heard a lot of you now talk about accessibility, and I think while I think initiatives are on the way to make it right, but it is not right yet. The state of accessibility for XR in education is not great. Even simple things like that, most tools wouldn't even allow captioning and things like that. And that's really the bare minimum. It's not a given, but if we lean over the shoulder and look at what the web per se has done, then that's an entirely different game. So there's a whole universe of standards around authoring as well. Testing tools, testing suites. Every of your browsers that you right now might have open has a button somewhere where you can open web development and run an accessibility check. It may not be precise, it may not be great, but it helps. We need to achieve a similar level, I think, for XR accessibility. And it's great to see that Apple, Google, Meta are all putting effort into it, but it's too little too late, in my opinion, and we need to ramp up the initiatives that are done around that. If you're interested in a bit more critique about that, we just published a paper at iLRN this year, and here's the link in the chat.
Fantastic, thank you. While people are clicking that, let's throw up the next poll here, Michael, please. Thank you. So really think about commercial tools. I mean, here we're talking about, tools created, within our industry, but, there's a lot of stuff out there. So really just a quick, and again, this one you get 30 seconds on. We'll move this along. And I threw this list together, I'll be honest and say it wasn't comprehensive at any point. In fact, if you click on other, feel free to throw in chat what others, I missed in kind of what I was putting up there. All right, sharing the results. Everybody should be able to see that. So, lots of people using things like GitHub, clear winner here. Sketchfab, I think, is a terrific case in point of something that isn't going away immediately, but definitely a new corporate owner is taking it in a different direction. I think there's many of us sort of watching that with bated breath to see where that goes. I've certainly used it in plenty of classes I've taught as a source of free objects. All right. So thinking about these, again, getting to this idea of these, commercial services, where is what, each of you are doing different? What distinguishes you from those? If I've got a bunch of faculty, why don't I just have a GitHub repository and I've got my stuff there and I know where it is and I've got, why aren't those good enough? Or where is what you're doing, adding to that? And Fridolin, let's start with you on that point.
Yeah, fantastic. Yes, I have a strong opinion on that. So the commercial services, especially the ones listed, I think are a fair picture of what's going on out there. It just has nothing to do with learning. So the support that you have in commercial repositories is either on a lower level or on a functionality level, but not on a pedagogical level, on a semantics level, on a workflow level. That's completely missing. So you can get fantastic 3D resources, but how you integrate them actually into a meaningful learning activity is not part of any of the even metadata description that you would find in these repositories, not to speak of that maybe there are executable formats like iLRN that could help express some of it. And that's then still negligent of the kind of curricular or classroom integration that you need to do as an educator surrounding this, some preparatory activity that may be required to get your target group in the mood, some management activity you might have to do if you're running that in a physical classroom space where you need to manage 30 people or something like that.
Yeah.
And what you do afterwards to make sure that this was a good exercise that people reflect on. So these repositories are great, but they only go that far, and that's where we start. So,
right. Well, and that's a fantastic. And Sean, I'm struck with your example, your sort of your origin story, because I think about the human anatomy, and I imagine there's lots of models available in all those services listed there. Yet you were driven within your own to do your own models, which I think is in part another aspect of what Fridolin is speaking to is purpose built for education versus for other purposes. I mean, is that part of your thinking? Where do you see these commercial services? How do they? What's the relationship with the effort that you're helping to lead?
Yeah, I think in some ways it's complementary, right? I think there's certainly a place for commercial services, commercial products, et cetera. I think we've all benefited from the decrease in cost and innovation that has come again from the hardware. I think on the software and content side, the challenge is in order for these solutions to be scalable in a commercial setting, they often need to be kind of one size fits all. So that's, one size fits all for across the continuum of K-12 through graduate education, which doesn't always work, but also faculty, certainly at my institution, I imagine elsewhere as well, they often want to customize the content, to fit their unique approaches, their preferences, et cetera. So that's been one of the big drivers of this open educational library is that it is freely adaptable, people can revise kind of as needed. So that's been one of the main drivers. I think also just, in academia, we often have a longer kind of event horizon and timeline, so people can spend more time on the development than in the commercial space. I know we've seen pivots all over the place, right? From the hardware ecosystems to software, things that we've all invested heavily in, like the Google Daydream ecosystem, Microsoft HoloLens, et cetera, right? So I think the longevity and the lasting power of academic solutions is often far different than kind of the quarterly timeline of commercial solutions.
Right. And in Ekaterina, so where does this sit with you? And I don't want to just restrict you to the ethical hat. Feel free to speak more broadly, although with your service focused on the ethical and accessible sides, that's kind of a natural point. But I don't want to limit you to just that as thinking about this relationship with commercial services.
Well, I mean, we use in our educational practices, we often direct teachers towards existing libraries if they're looking for an app, for example, to illustrate climate change. So where we are try to include all kind of resources. And but when you are sharing educational resources, not about kind of just physically share them. It's really important to curate them and to tag them appropriately so that people find what they need quickly. And you need to kind of, it's also a big challenge for us to kind of keep all the resources updated. We don't have the resources that commercial actors have. You know, like every time Meta comes with updates, suddenly our apps that we have developed for educational purposes, they start to misbehave. And maybe our project is already ended, the funding is ended. So how do we update those apps? So tagging and metadata and creating is a big part of these efforts. It's not just kind of sharing the software, but also in this ethical the ethical library is tagging and the rating system that actually is connected to the guidelines is very important. And another thing that I want to second you, Fridolin, you comment about that commercial actors doing too little too late to support accessibility. I actually would like to point the attention to the fact that they can make big money by following those standards, because a lot of public bodies, when they do acquire software, they have very strict requirements for solutions being accessible, and there's a lot of money in those governmental contracts. So if they really want to secure those contracts, they really should think about accessibility. It's not just about being nice to and include people with disabilities, but it's also about making profits.
Right. Well, and I think it's yeah, there's power in numbers. I mean, getting again back to something all of you were saying, this idea of sharing and bringing folks together. Our fourth poll, this is going to be super quick one because our time is getting short, but you shouldn't have to think about it too much. So here's your chance to jump in. Give you 30 seconds to jump in. Where are you and your organization as far as ready to do this? Are you doing it yourself? You're thinking about doing it. And so there are the results there. People still on the fence. And I think it's, one of the things I've seen in conversations I've had, as people are in the experimental phase on their campuses, it's where things tend to be sort of messy and dirty and kind of one-offs. And as you start to scale, I mean, moving along, which the maturing process, again, getting to something, all of our speakers have said, where you want to set some standards and have some repeatability and stuff, is where you start to see the value of these kind of efforts come together. Fantastic. So our last point here as we move along, if you have questions, feel free to throw them into the question panel, and I'll try to get to those as we move along. So you've all touched on this, but I want to come back to this again, this idea of, so for those in the audience and those who will be watching the recording afterwards, and as we continue this conversation within the iLRN circle of scholars, where do you see the opportunities either within your own projects or other work that's happening outside of you that you think is a place for people to lean in on and get more involved with this type of thing? Ekaterina, why don't we start with you?
Thank you. So we at my research group and lab, we have kind of informally has grown a repository of our developments, our student projects. We are using both GitLab and GitHub, but we don't have any resources to kind of curate it, and so it's just kind of we have very limited time to do that. So, and when a certain project is over, like a Erasmus project where we're developing resources, then we don't know when we get the money to kind of keep on with that. So it's a lot of kind of enthusiasm that is our own time that has been kind of poured into this initiative. So I wish we had a more centrally supported initiative at our university, but not yet.
Sean.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that we decided to partner with the Recite group and David Anderson, who again is on the webinar, is that they already have a proven track record with grant funding from, again, in the United States' case, the National Science Foundation. So we see opportunities to build on that and seek other grants, either from NSF, private donors, other grant agencies in the United States and globally. So yeah, I think demonstrating efficacy with these kind of early efforts and then building on that. And I'll put a plug, Randy. I forget, is it next month that we're planning to speak about grant opportunities in the EDUCAUSE XR
Oh,
community?
yeah. Yes, I will share that link.
Perfect. So anyway, we will be inviting some experts to come and speak about ways that we all can collectively collaborate and individually seek grant funding. So that's the thing that comes to mind. But I think also just the fact that we're having this conversation today, thank you, Randy, for hosting, I think is a step in the right direction.
Fridolin.
Yeah, so I can only rehash what you already said. We're open to collaborate, and if there are common programs we can go for, even the better. I think at the same time, it's also important to lobby around this. So we do have great institutions that help make this a convenience, like One EdTech Global, the IEEE Standards Association Learning Technology Standardization Committee, various others, where if enough users request this, it will come through. There will be actions taken if users ask for a better interoperability, for XR support in Canvas, and this and that. So make your voice heard. And if you want to work together on this, get in touch.
Fantastic. So a couple of other plugs. Please keep iLRN in general in mind, specifically the iLRN June conference. The invitation is open for practitioner papers and presentations. Love to see some of you on this. Put in proposals, and definitely would be delighted to see all of you in person in Chicago in June. Where this conversation will continue, and you'll have an opportunity to talk with these practitioners and others who are working on these challenges and moving along. Michael or John, anything else we would like to touch on as we finish up here?
No, I just wanted to, I was typing it into the chat there. Thanks, Randy. That, yeah, iLRN would definitely love to see an invited panel or perhaps a special session related to exactly this. And I know there are a lot of people within the Immersive Learning Research Network, including Randall and our Michael, et cetera, who would really love to continue to collaborate with you all, our great panelists, on helping to cultivate these kinds of efforts. So just thank you so much for chiming in, the great resources here that you're all developing. And I think we just need to keep collaborating and working forward together.
Fantastic, thank you. Please keep your eyes on the immersivelrn.org website for the December Circle of Scholars talk on XR research standards that Christine will be moderating. And that's also where you can find more information about the conference and other activities that iLRN is taking. Thank you, Fridolin, Ekaterina, Sean, for making the time zones work and sharing your insights This is a fantastic conversation, and I look forward to continuing it with all of you.
Thanks,
you.
Andy.
Thank you, everybody.